welcome back. And we're moving into our first segment for today as we join in the celebration officially now to talk about the delisting of Belize's barrier reef. We have with us Amanda Burgos, who is the Executive Director for the Belize Audubon Society, and we have Janell Chanona, who's the Vice President for Oceana Belize. Good morning, ladies.
Good morning.
Welcome.
And good morning, Belize. Thank you so much for having us. For once, it's really, really, really good news. We've been on this call so many times to talk about petitions and community meetings, so we have a good reason to be here.
Yes, and I think it is a great way to come after coming on the show to talk so much about why we needed to do all the essentials to ensure that this would happen. So first of all, congratulations to all the entities involved. This has been a collaborative effort, and that's really where I want to jump off, because I think when we think of the this particular celebration, we may be tempted to only see the work within the past few years or the past year alone. But this has been a long journey taken on by many organizations. And I remember Oceana Belize kickstarting it with the People's Referendum.
Which was also a collaborative effort.
Yes.
The coalition
with
was
the Belize
formed
Coalition to save our natural heritage.
And that's why for us, I think the first way we jump in with this is saying thank you to you guys. I mean, we can't name names just because it's so very many people, but really to say thank you for people for
almost
sticking
8 years
with this issue. The moment they heard about it, they did everything we asked. They took the selfies, they signed the petitions, they stood in line and voted when they knew it was not going to be official, but they wanted their positions known. You know, they came to our community meetings. Some of them went out to see the boat leave. I mean, they really, it really has been a journey together. And I think that's what gives us hope moving forward, because there's still so very many challenges facing the Belize Barrier Reef and our marine environment. But that national consciousness, that national energy, and these types of milestones to give us a little bit of motivation to say, okay, it can happen when we act together as one country, people, government.
Can we put some context on it, though, for those who have not been following it? Very few. But what is being listed, and how did we get there?
Okay, so we got on the endangered list in about 2009.
We were inscribed in 1996 because you have to apply for this thing. I mean, this is not something that you can just claim and then you raise the flag.
And the outstanding universal value of the site has to be identified. It goes through an entire process and committee. It's not, I mean, if we had to go and inscribe a new site at this point, it would be very difficult and it would take years. I think Jamaica was the most recent in this region, and it took them years to get the Jonquil Mountains into the list of World Heritage Sites. So when we got on the endangered list, we were thinking, how quickly can we get off of it? They did it really as things are happening, it's not going the right way, you're not managing this properly, this is international, this is global patrimony, so how can we move forward? We thought it would be relatively quick. And so what happened is that we then started to look at what were the next steps. Somewhere in there, IUCN, which is the International Union for Conservation and Nature, but it's a Spanish an acronym, they came in and they helped us to do a plan to figure out the actions needed. Because truthfully, the first year or two, everyone was kind of scratching their head, where do we go from here? The actions that were required were mangrove legislation. Really, one of the pivotal events that really started this whole thing was illegal dredging within the Pelican Keys range. There was filling and dredging, and that obviously is within the World Heritage Site. It's some of the unique habitat ecosystems. I believe it's where mangrove and corals actually start growing together. So we had this list, and mangroves were highlighted.
Unsustainable coastal
development.
And of course, offshore oil concessions as an overarching threat on everything, not just on the World Heritage Site.
We also had the promotion of the Integrated Coastal Zone Management plan, and the implementation of it is really what was being highlighted, and the fact that we needed to get really we needed to get our act together to start developing, to do sustainable development. And that's really what was flagged. So there was a lot of check marks that we had to start filling.
So it wasn't actual damage to the reef. It wasn't to say, okay, well, the reef was damaged by 30% and we have to get it up to 10% before it's delisted.
No, it was
No.
threats, because again, when you are inscribed, you are basically pledging, committing, promising to the world that you are going to be a good steward. And then you have this brand, and the brand itself has a value. So one of the things that was identified during this process was that the Dead Seas, which is essentially mud, through the World Heritage brand, gets millions of dollars every year from tourists coming to the Dead Sea to imbibe in the healing powers of the mud or whatever it is that they believe in this mud. And then here we have this living, breathing, incredible structure, and they were like, you're not using your World Heritage brand enough. You have to pitch this for what it is. This is it's fewer than 50 sites in the world, marine sites in the world, and Belize is one of them through 7 locations. And it's just I guess in our minds, and this is where it still has to go ahead in terms of elevating this in that, yes, we're the second longest barrier reef in the world, and we're also a World Heritage Site, and what that means, both at our level, at the community level, at the government level, so that we can really embrace this concept of what it means to be World Heritage.
It wasn't branded properly, and also we hadn't been managing it for a World Heritage Site. I think a lot of us hadn't realized that there are details and there are ways that we're supposed to be managing this site. It's not your ordinary marine protected area, which, like I said, we have those, and those are valuable and important, but this is kind of the cherry on the top and world class, and we have to manage it that way.
Yeah.
And so what we got down from UNESCO was, this is really important, you need to up your game.
This particular issue, I think, is going to be a very important part of our history in looking at how to lobby to get change, how to translate people's power into actual action. Because while quite a bit of what you've mentioned required political will, making legislations, the oil moratorium, it also required people to pressure for it to happen.
Right.
And to do so consistently. 8 years. We don't usually have that kind of longevity on an issue in Belize. So I wanna ask you from your perspective. I don't know how much time you've spent analyzing just what worked and what didn't, and what was kind of the key to getting to the point where we met the requirements to come off the list. Because I know people feel the oil moratorium was all that was necessary. That was only one. There were other issues as well. So what do you identify as the key to ending this 8-year lobbying effort?
Well, yeah, I'll jump in on the moratorium, and then Amanda can take up on the UNESCO front. But definitely, Marlene, when I look at this, and that's why I started off thanking the people, because that is what people ask me, like, what was the magic bullet? What broke things? And it was like, no, it's what didn't change. Yeah. It was that people came out every single day. It is that people didn't let the traditional divisive tactics of time, of politics, of just jadedness of you're never going to get this. They were like, okay, I don't care, if we are bitter enemies on the political front. On this issue, we are one. And it was really incredible to watch that and to see that being embraced. And I remember some leaders, would call us up and, why are these people coming to my house? Why am I getting these phone calls? And why is my server crashing? And why is, and it's like, well, because people care. Yeah. And I don't think I could have referenced a better point, when we hosted the Prime Minister for, as emblematic of the political leadership on this. And he said, when people lead, leaders follow. He quoted Mahatma Gandhi on that. And that is really what it comes down to. Because at the end of the day, we, the people, are relying on these resources every single day. We will feel it first.
Yeah.
We, the people, are looking to make sure that we can continue to depend on the sea for food, for jobs, for our sense of cultural identity. And that is what it came down to. People internalized this issue and they made it their own, and regardless of whatever anybody else could tell them, they saw the writing on the wall, and they knew if they didn't stand up and keep standing up for what they believed in, they were going to be, be forced to fall for anything.
You couldn't find one turning point, maybe just where
The seismic ships were a big
I
catalyst.
thought so too.
Because that is when the San Pedro community and the Kefauver communities
It was
looked
visual.
out of their windows
And it
saw
was real.
those
We
ships.
chased the ship out of Belize. Like, I don't think we realized it was here. It was slated. It started working.
Yeah.
Yes.
And the communities, and especially I think also looking at the collaboration between the private sector and environmentalists who don't always
The
see eye to
tourism
eye.
community,
Yes.
the hoteliers, the fishers. I mean, I remember being in that room in the San Pedro conference room when the government came to do its presentation, and we didn't have to say anything. I mean,
No, we didn't say it.
it was tangible of people just saying, okay, I love your slideshow, but can you please tell the ship to leave?
Yeah,
And-
it was what can we do now? This has to stop. And it was very, I mean, at that point, I think people figured we're going to shut this down some way.
And they knew we weren't being sensationalists, and
Yes.
we weren't exaggerating the reality, because people understood very clearly the only reason to collect seismic data, the only reason to do seismic testing is for offshore oil exploration. So they automatically said, okay, we believe you, and then, oh my goodness, holy ship, here we are, and people just took it and was like, okay, I don't know. I mean, they were looking. We had to really ask them not to think about, going out and
They had
facing off
ship
with the
watch.
boats.
It was
The AIS, the technology
had,
came in,
yeah.
but sorry.
No, but they had some radical ideas of how we were going to stop this. So I think at that point, people were gung-ho. And I think it was a case of we had to see it to really believe it. It was like, no, that's not going to happen. And you all have been saying this for so many years. It's not like they kept thinking that we were pushing it back and it was being deferred. But I think at that point, it was literally the writing was on the wall.
Every resistance has a face, even though you might have other persons who are supporting. It appears to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the people of San Pedro and the Minister of Tourism, that they really put him in a headlock, and they have been really, it appears that way. Because, and I'm saying that because although we're here singing Kumbaya, Oceana has gone through phases. I remember when Audrey was there, her approach was, I'm going to take these guys up to task. And I can remember the approach of the government was, referendum? I'm not even recognizing that. That's not official. They also said, listen, drill we will. I could clearly remember that. And so the approach that we're reaping now probably has been because there have been that, talking about the aggressiveness of what Oceana first took on. Of course, it has taken on different phases appropriate to where it was. But people of San Pedro, I was on Facebook watching people, as you say, from diametrically opposed political views coming out and saying, no man, I have to do this. So could you talk to us about the character of the people in San Pedro? And I think more so than the Prime Minister in my book, the Minister of Tourism, Mr. Heredia, has to...
who responded.
Who responded has to be tapped on the shoulder.
No, credit where credit is due, and we've spoken about this where, the Minister of Tourism and the area representative for San Pedro, a former fisherman, I mean, he has said clearly, if anyone can show us where offshore oil would destroy my reef, I will be the first one to jump. And the crowd actually started chanting, jump, jump, jump. And then when they asked him, please go and find out who you need to talk to let this ship leave, he left the room.
And
A couple hours later, he came back, said, I made the call and the ship is leaving. So that is really, again, I think it represents a moment where people realize, I have a voice. And if I don't use it, I won't be heard. And I won't be heard by the people that it needs to get to, and I won't echo in the corridors of power, because very clearly, and I have to say, at that San Pedro meeting, we had people from Hopkins, we had people from Placencia, people from Kikaker.
They all flew
They
in
all
or caught
came
boat.
in.
Yeah.
Remember that meeting in San Pedro was the only, and that was because we went out the night before. We said, guys, this boat is here, and this is what it's doing, and this is how you can follow it, and they rallied together, and they called BTB, and they called the Ministry of Tourism, and they said, we need some answers. We have a lot of questions. And that is how that conversation ended up happening the next day. And so when the tourism sector especially realized, okay, this may be the only opportunity to see face to face what these people are saying, they came in, and that's why that room was as full as it was.
Yeah. And it wasn't the environmentalists taking the
No.
lead. It was
That's
your
exactly- we
fishermen.
didn't have to say
We were
anything.
very much in the background at that meeting.
We and that's what we wanted, because at the end of the day, we were the source of information. We did not have to exaggerate anything. We did not have to create any facts. There were no alternative facts in the room. And they really said, there were people there saying, my dad used to be an oil man in Texas, and this is what this means, and I have seen X happen here. And they brought their own stories, they brought their own rationale of why this was not a good idea. And I think they were also offended by the fact that, for multiple reasons, whatever it was at the time, they didn't know about this stuff. Remember, a lot of things happened in conference rooms, and I think the last one was at the casino up north. I mean, there were a lot of things happening behind closed doors. This, even the approval of the seismic studies happened, and then bam, the ship is here. I mean, there was a lot, and I think giving me hope moving forward is that people want to know in advance, and now leaders know that they need to meaningfully
and we've seen
consult.
it recently. I mean, we've had EIA consultancies in San Pedro where the room has been shut down, actually, where you can't, because they know now that they have to be aggressive. They have to speak for their resources, for what they think is important. There is a development, Cayo Rosario, that is being proposed, and the San Pedranos are against it, vehemently opposed, and so they've been making their voice known. So I think they've realized, especially San Pedro, I think it's very much in their yard, not even backing too far.
That's their bread and butter.
Exactly, and so there is the need to speak up for yourself, because if you don't, then you don't know who will represent what agenda and where. So they always have to be vigilant, and I think that is something that they have learned throughout this whole process.
Like I said, I think there's so much to learn about how we were able to get here. And I think what Kevin said, it really, it's almost that I felt that we needed to have someone sound the alarm. We couldn't say, oh, well, we're going to be working on this silently. We needed to sound the alarm, get people emotional about it, and somehow we managed to keep them emotional about it. But I wanted to say that there were also a lot of the behind the scenes actions that were taking place, including keeping people up to date. And you mentioned the servers very casually, but you all had environmentalists from across the globe inundating government representatives to do something about this.
We had letters of petitions, WWF organized to send directly to the Prime Minister
I think
on
what
the UNESCO.
people don't realize is they want to see a name and they want to see a brand itself. And I always tease Janell, Oceana is a big name and sometimes the shadow is big. And I always tease her, sometimes I can say things when I'm sitting next to her and they'll say, Janell said. Because the name is, I mean, you hear Oceana and everyone goes Oceana, Oceana. But the reality of the situation is, it was done through a collaborative effort. Belize Audubon was involved from day one. You have the case of BTIA. The union was involved in the beginning. The only way we pulled off the people's referendum was because
40 individuals and organizations came together just on this issue. I mean, that alone is incredible. You think, we always get chastised as a people for crab in a bucket mentality. But
when it's important, everyone came
together.
out.
And that's what it is. I mean, the Belize Institute of Law and Policy, Candy is really able to be out, but her advice is always meaningful and has a lot of historical context because she's been in the trenches on environmental issues
in the past
for so
few
long.
years. We had WWF come in, and I think one of the things that we do need to mention is that we see the people version of it, but there was also a lot of studies and documents that went into this. So we've had studies commissioned on the impacts. We had studies that were looking at the agreements, the sharing agreements. We had studies that, and in the case of the World Heritage, we've done mangrove assessments. We had Emil Charrington who did for us an entire assessment of what is the status of mangroves in Belize. We have had the tourism value, and we only looked at Half Moon Blue Hole and Laughing Bird and the millions that it represents in tourism dollars. So we have been collaborating on a lot of fronts and a lot of ends, looking at various aspects, making the case in 5 million ways.
But also not settling, because if we go back into the history, we went from, okay, well, we'll give contracts in some areas, not others. We'll zone priority areas. We'll do some developments, not all developments. But then we still had Puerto Azul popping up on the radar. We still had the seismic boats coming in. And I had a number of other examples I could think of, which are gone now. But there were so many efforts in between to say, we'll kind of half-heartedly do this for you. But we didn't. And I mean we as in the people and we as the organizations involved, we didn't settle for less than what we knew we wanted.
Well, we couldn't, and as Amanda is referencing, the science was telling us very, very clearly what was going to happen if we did. And you use the term bread and butter. When it's your everyday meal and that's what you're using to provide for your family with dignity, you're not upon the street to beg, you're not upon the street to thief, you are taking care of your family, and this is how you take care of your family, and somebody's coming in saying, yeah, we're going to do something risky. It might destroy it, but don't worry, you know, we'll take care of it, trust me. You know, people got that. And the fact that the scientists that came together, that looked at mangroves, seagrass beds, that looked at coral reef, that looked at everything in our marine environment and said, the name of this report is Too Precious to Drill. It was, I mean, that is one of those things where, I mean, throughout that document served us immensely well, because it was, we have invested in the science. We have put together these documents. We know the value of mangroves. I was joking with Amanda yesterday, we should add the mangrove as one of our national trees in Belize, because you look at the, you know, just invaluable service that this humble little tree, as a 3-species resident to Belize, what they contribute in coastal protection, in fisheries, in tourism, and it's just so undervalued. I have developers telling me all the time,
They block the view. What are you talking about?
and they bring mosquito,
Dr.
and
Flies.
Dr. Fly, and I would rather chop them down and then pay the fine rather than go through the business of getting it.
Well, the fine is bigger
And now, exactly. So through the strengthened mangrove regulations, which came into effect June 23rd, so they are already law, that mangrove now has a stronger chance of being valued for what it is. And we have also seen, credit where credit is due again, where other developers have taken that mangrove and have done it in such a way that you can get the breeze and you can mitigate the flies and you can maintain the integrity, the aesthetics of the site, but the integrity of your coastline, because we have seen where seawalls come and go, and those mangrove roots are there retaining your property. So it's really, again, that was the strength of it, that you saw very clearly A plus B will equal C, or X and Y, and you will end up with a Z.
There's a natural predator relationship between, and it's called, the balance of it is sustainable development. But tourism is equally a threat to our barrier reef as it is
unsustainable tourism, yes.
Unsustainable tourism, but just tourism on a whole. I mean, I have a friend who was explaining to me that there are areas out there that simply because of the number of tourists who come and their sunscreen, because the reef is a natural, it's a living organism.
Yeah.
It's like putting sunscreen in your aquarium.
Yes.
And so, you know, that balance is something which, as much as we can, which it's, I don't want to call it a boogeyman, but the real threat of offshore drilling, there are other little small threats that add up to it as well.
Totally.
So my question really is, the foreign minister said that there's no such thing as a permanent friend. Well, there's no such thing as a permanent victory. So
of course.
as I'm listening here, all of the things that have made us delisted are sort of thin. They're paper in terms of law is paper. That's what it is. And they can all be reversed. I mean, at some point in time.
Or not enforced.
Or not enforced. That's another big issue. At some point in time, the government can decide economically. I understand Oceania, I understand the people at San Pedro, but drill we will.
But that's why we called it the People's Law, Kevin, and that applies to every threat confronting. And we will be the first to tell you that the list of threats against the Belize environment is probably as long as the reef itself, because there are a lot of work. There's a lot of work left to be done. So we will be back on this coach multiple times to come.
That was my question.
But it's really, Kevin,
The second round. What is the second round?
But it's really, we called it the People's Law, homage to the People's Referendum, in saying that this law, and say what you want about semantics, it stops offshore oil, so moratorium, ban, whatever, any law, any paper can be reversed. But it is really about the fact that the longevity of the law will depend on the people. This law has to be changed by the leaders. So any future leader who wants to upend this legislation needs to come to the people of Belize and say, we are going to change the law and this is why. And the people of Belize will either accept it or they will say, no, we're not ready. Yeah. That is the reality of it. That is the transparency of it. That is the accountability of it. And that is where people feel that at least we have this, and this is why we have to get the paper. And that's why our organizations work hard once we have the paper to hold that law to what it can be and the importance of it.
No.
And that is essential moving forward. But it is also that we have to realize that reef, as you said, is extremely, extremely delicate. So at the same time, NGOs often get categorized as they will never be satisfied, because we will be back saying, Hawaii has banned sunscreen, Mexico has stopped sunscreen, Belize needs to ban sunscreen. And then on top of that, we're going to come. Mr. Tourism Man, you need to not dredge anymore, you can't cut any mangroves anymore how you want. There will always, this is unsustainable fisheries issue. The fishermen will always say, oh, but it's me always giving up something. But we are not in the business of putting them out of business. The idea, and that's one of the reasons I love the Belize Audubon Society, is striking a balance between people and the environment. Because at the end of the day, we and everybody else that has been on this issue, it's about the people. It's about making sure that we as a people can continue to depend on these resources. Because believe me, and the fishermen say it eloquently, the man watch me right in the face, he said, Miss Chanona, if we don't stop these guys coming into our country and destroying our resources, when they're done using gillnet and done broke up for we coral and done care for we baby lobster, you know what they do? They go home. He said, this stuff we home, where we going? And that is it. There's no plan B, C, D for any of us. This is our home, and if we don't take care of it.
I don't think we should. I wasn't suggesting that we minimize what the law is. But the law is a preliminary step, because, as just following up, in terms of enforcement, you pass a law, but you have no infrastructure. For example, the law has been passed in relation to mangrove, but has additional resources been promised in relation to another department of it? I mean, just don't give me a paper. It's like Trump meeting in North Korea and saying, where is it? Show me the meat.
Are you wearing your jacket today, Kevin? do I care? I don't care, but do you?
No, I think this is an important issue for us. And as Marlene was saying, I am impressed with the people of San Pedro. I don't, as much as you guys said that other people came in, I don't know if the issue was a mainland issue.
No,
but I do think you need to.
And needed the face of a mainland group that would have had the timeline and the intensity of it.
I do think that we need to give credit to the people in the fact that the hope is what we're doing is stirring a consciousness. Correct. And by being conscious, you then now are becoming stewards of your resources. For instance, managed access for fisheries. We've had all of this hype about managed access and how it works. The truth of how managed access is going to work is by the fishermen being responsible, filling out their logbooks, telling us what's being extracted, and by them being the stewards of their resource and saying, you know what, fisheries, there's this boat out there, and it is happening. It is a slow process because you have to build trust. Absolutely. When they call, you have to move.
Respond.
You have to respond. And the reality of the fact is they have to feel that they are empowered to be the voice and the champion for their resource.
Yep.
Because I think as Belizeans, it's easy for us to kind of be apathetic and say, well, nothing happen because, I call and they don't come. But I think the more that they see people responding, the more we will start. So I think with the sunscreen, for instance, that is a very recent conversation in the Belizean consciousness. I wouldn't want to say that if we start educating our dive boats and tour operators that, take that sunscreen off and put this product up, that they won't do it.
Yeah.
Because we haven't even had that conversation with them.
Yeah. And timing is everything. And I've always wondered whether or not what the impact of the BP oil spill in the Gulf had in our own
That's what started
sense
it.
of consciousness.
That's what started it. When I think as a nation, when we looked at the image of that pipe just, blasting oil into the Gulf, that's when we started asking here, what if it happened in Belize? And then when the maps came out and we realized it could, that April 2010 moment is really... But just to pick up really quickly on something you said, we do need to acknowledge, I mean, I know and 120% San Pedro showed up and stood up for this country, and we told them that. But the Belize Coalition, I mean, we took road trips. We were in every single community, village, anybody that wanted us to talk about it, and everywhere we went, the reaction was just as tangible as it is in San Pedro. So know that there are people just as vehemently opposed to oil in San Ignacio as in Punta Gorda, in Hopkins, Orange Walk. Everywhere we went, it was always the same. And that's why this is such a proud moment of Belizean unity. Because no matter the Belizeans at home, the Belizeans abroad, when we hit social media, we went to these international events, they were like, hell no. And then the Belizeans at heart, the people who either come to Belize every year or have made Belize their new home, they were like, no, I've seen this where I'm from, you don't want this here.
Can I be a songboard?
Really it.
I know we're running out of time, but can I be a songboard? I know you don't want an easy time on that chair over there.
Yes, no.
But a songboard for the cynics. When we had the issue with dams, we had Miss Cindy Gonzalez.
Candy.
Candy. I forget, she's going to kill me.
She's on the coalition.
Yeah, who was really the face of it. She really pushed it. I mean, to be honest, the average Belizean
doesn't know her.
She went and took it to court, put her money where it was, put her time where I think I was. Now, the other major fight, to my mind, historically, has been the Oceana fight with the Barra Reef. And one of the faces of it is San Pedro. San Pedro has a large...
tourism, fishing.
Not only tourism, I'm talking about the persons who relocate, the Americans, the nationals who are here. And Oceana is an organization which the funding doesn't come locally. It's a philanthropist. I know what the proper term for it is. Somebody who's not Belizean, who's funding it.
Yes.
So financially, who's driving it?
No. Don't
Hold
go there.
on. You
might not get slammed.
Hold on. Who's driving these initiatives? And not necessarily, it doesn't start from a local person. It's not James the taxi man.
How do you know that though? Your premise is flawed.
Oh, hold on.
Okay.
We've accepted that in Cayo, it was Candy, who was the face of it. We've accepted that in San Pedro, that community is a community whose DNA is not necessarily the classic. And so my thing is, how do we continue, or how do we separate it now to get the face of it, the trigger of it, to be the local man to say, listen, as we've already gotten the trail blazed through, my next issue now environmentally with the ocean is X. Let's step on this.
So in 2008, before Oceana even legally established
Can I
itself
throw in one other thing?
Yes.
Because I'm not going to ask another question after this.
I don't think Stephanie gives you more time.
Yeah, her face is already there. But the listing, being endangered, comes with certain benefits financially. You know, you get, I would think that you have an interest, you have a case where you can then say, you know what, I need projects to help me to get over these things. Not necessarily from Oceana, but from other entities. Know that you're not listed. Are we exposed that we no longer get some of these?
No, we're not listed.
So we're not listed. do we lose, I mean, everything has a silver lining. Do we lose the opportunity to exploit certain things to our benefit?
Wait, but his Oceana shade first, and we'll get to your book. Don't worry.
Go there,
So-
you go there.
Listen, this is not, and why I get sensitive about this is because it's unfair to my team. From 2009, everybody that's worked for Oceana has been a Belizean. We are Oceana in Belize legally.
You're missing
And
the...
no, but hang on. The 2008 exercise that Oceana came to Belize before it established conducted a feasibility study. And all our campaign goals have come from James the taximan, John the fisherman, Jane the fish cleaner, and Amanda the scientist. Whoever we could speak to in 2008, we did. And that is why Oceana is in Belize, because it was clear that an advocacy organization, and I don't know yet if there's anybody else doing only advocacy,
No.
much less only advocacy for marine policy. And since 2009, the entire Belize team, starting with Audrey's team, some of them transferred with me, and the people that work for me today, we are working for Belize and the benefit of Belizean resources being garnered by Belizeans. And those goals are not about exploiting anything. It's about protecting what we have, because our fisheries goals are what Punta Gorda fishermen started 20 years ago, saying, please, we need to get rid of these gill nets. Look, I have written letters to the Minister of Fisheries and begged him to get rid of these nets because we see what they're doing. So every goal that we have had and we will ever have has come from the people of Belize. And funding, well, how we get our funding doesn't come from the ability to say, we're on a list, we need money to get off the list. It comes from the fact that we can say, I have 169 licensed gill netters in Belize, and I want to make sure they can be supported to get to cleaner gear, alternative gear, better livelihoods, life skills, to be empowered with new life skills so that they don't need to use a gill net. Because I want to keep them fishing, but I want them to be always able to fish. And science is saying, if you continue to use a gill net, it is only a matter of time. And that really has to be understood clearly, that these NGOs, and they, like I said, we acknowledge full thrust that some people feel that NGOs have been too empowered and they're too powerful, and you're acquiescing to some foreign agenda. But the truth is, we do not get our funding to create some foreign agenda. All of Amanda's goals, her entire, you have 100 and something team? 140
No, my team is 47.
47. Sorry, her volunteers. Her volunteers.
She said you should get to 100.
Our volunteers. No, but it's really critical to understand this, because the NGOs are not working against, and this is where I really want that this experience helps us to turn that page, because it was collective leadership from the NGOs, from the political leaders, from the community leaders, from just Joe Public, that together we can make sure that we get where we need to go, because we depend on this, not because, and we get, I mean, everybody gets foreign assistance, but at the end of the day, it is what you get the funds for. And I know
And who's lobbying for
it's
it?
famous that you get money for do one thing and then you use it for something else. In our case, we are
You can't.
totally transparent. We have to submit, I mean, legally you can go to Belmopan and you can get reports from Amanda's organization and from BAS
Thank you,
and from
Amanda. Yeah.
Oceana to see exactly how much we've gotten and what we've done with it.
Yeah.
So I kind of want to transition into a nicer version, because the assumption is that you're getting money for negative stuff. So at Audubon, Belize Audubon, we manage protected areas. So the heart of what we do is manage 7 protected areas. That is the meat of what we do. We also do community outreach, because they're buffer communities. We're looking at alternative livelihoods. We are looking at education. I have junior naturalist birding clubs in 7 buffer communities around the protected areas I work. So there is a lot of other work happening, and I just want to highlight that the bad stuff, there is also money that goes into really good stuff. I mean, this, I wanted to show this because
Yes.
we're ending, and I know, but Jeff, UNDP Small Grants Program, and Oak Foundation, we had a project that did a lot of the studies for World Heritage and the UNESCO stuff, but we also, recognizing the brand and the marketing that we wanted to promote for Belize, is we did a little passport for the Belize World
Love it.
Heritage. And I want you to know that Belize, if you go in the Caribbean and you go, we can toot our own horn. We manage some of the best sites. We have our structures in place, our creativity, what we've seen. We do boat-to-boat grassroots. The level of work that we do in Belize when it comes to protected areas is commendable. It is fantastic.
Bar none.
They're looking at us for examples. So the idea here is, and everyone now wants to do one of these. I think next year Belize Audubon will do it for our protected areas because it's our 50th anniversary next year.
Nice.
But what we did is we did a little map and we're telling you exactly where the World Heritage sites are, where they are located, each protected area. It gives you a breakdown informational on the site, and then it has a page for you to get a stamp. So at each of these places, if you go to the managers, they have a stamp that looks just like this little logo, the 20-year logo that we created in 2016. And from there, you can go and you can collect your stamps. It's really an invitation for people to get out and know what it is that we're protecting, to know the resources in this country, to get an opportunity to experience. We at Belize Audubon also promote that. So this month we're having our visits to Blue Hole Half Moon. They're
Some
filling
are
up.
already sold out.
Yes. I think yesterday I checked the 14th, I think is already sold out. The 21st, the 2 Saturdays are gone. All I have left is Sunday the 22nd. We started off with small boats. We were taking 40-seaters, and then now we're taking one boat, but it's from Brown Sugar, from the water taxi. So it's comfortable. It's a big boat, a nice ride. Well, it's a long ride. It's 2 hours, but the idea is giving people the opportunity, and it's at
See
cost.
for themselves.
And it's almost, I mean,
You
it's
can't
at
get a better
cost. You
deal.
can't get a better deal. If you try to do that from one of the tourism destinations, you're going to pay more, and this is trying to make it accessible.
Yeah. You know, and I think this should be on everybody's bucket list to be able to
Say you've
fill up
been.
their passport, their Belize
Yes.
passport. And I think we fail often to realize that there are many Belizeans who have not been out to the reef, who've not had that experience.
Right.
They still love it, they're still proud of it, but I think having that first-hand experience will make all the difference.
Totally. And again, that's an NGO mainstay in terms of their organizations up and down the coast that are doing just that,
That's
getting
right.
kids into the water. I know it's a little hard because of the safety issues, but however possible, you know, where the NGO community, I know C is also doing something similar for Laughing Bird as one of the sites, getting people out there. And that's really the parting shot of, you know, this is ours. And I like to say that Belize doesn't want to be saved. She just wants to be loved, because if you love something, you take care of it and you protect it, and that's really what's going to drive us into the future of a bright, sustainable future, and that's what's really going to be the energy, the fuel to continue to drive the change that needs to happen in the corridors of power.
And it's wins like these that really help motivate us because 8 years is a long time.
Yeah.
And I do want to say that on the UNESCO front for the World Heritage, we did have a new Secretary General, Mr. Blades, and the Deputy Prime Minister, who on that end, we kept talking about the oil, but I want to highlight on that end, when he came in, he was like, okay, we've been here really long. What do we need to do? And I think they really helped us, because you do need a champion at a government level.
Yeah.
I think with the oil, it ended up at Prime Minister's desk, and so he was the one who we officially had to recognize, because at the end of the day, that one was so big that Prime Minister had to step in. But with this one, I think we also have had faces and champions.
Okay.
So thank you.
Yes.
Thank you
And
for
thank you to
coming in
Belize.
as well. Yes, and we appreciate you coming in to kind of talk about what it took to get here, and that's an important part of the conversation, understanding the journey.
Yes.
So thank you.
And we'll be back soon.
We will take a break, and when we come back, we're shifting over to the Hotel Association to find out what they're up to, so stay tuned.